Hello and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz, and today I have the first video in my new box card series. I love box cards, and I wanted to start with a really simple one. So I am using the Stampendous Dome Jar Shaker die set, and we're going to make this adorable bubblegum box card. We're starting with 2 pieces of dark blue cardstock that I have cut using the largest die. And I am going to take the smaller of the 2 ovals from this die set, and I am going to cut that right into the middle of one of these panels. This is going to create the window for our box card. I love this die set because you can make a bubblegum machine, a mason jar, a snow globe, or you can do your own thing with it and just use it to create a box card with different elements. On both of these panels, I am folding those flaps where it created score lines backwards, and you can see how they nestle together and they create a box. But the beauty of a box card is that it will also fold flat and fit into an envelope for mailing. You can make a box card without a specialty die set, but for this first video in the series, I wanted to show you the easiest way I know, and that is to use a die set. I'll link this die set and a couple other options below so you can kind of see what's out there. But if you're interested in doing this without specialty dies, stay tuned. I have so many box cards coming up. I'm so excited. If you have ideas for box cards or particular things you would like to see or questions you have, please leave them in the comments below, and I will do my very best to cover as much as I can. I have added 2 red pieces to create my machine. That red piece on the bottom, I had to be very careful to go just around the outside edges. It just fits around that oval. And then the dome at the top, I put glue only at the very top of that because, again, it's going to kind of overhang into that opening a little bit. There's also a piece to create like the flap where the gumball would come out, and then this is our spinner. I like the idea of this having some dimension, like you actually could crank it on the bubblegum machine. And so I've layered up a couple pieces of cardstock topped with some matte silver cardstock to make that look a little more realistic. On the bottom, that little flap has a piece at the top where it can fold. It's a score line, and that would allow you to lift that up and create a second like hole behind it in that darker cardstock. I didn't want to do that. I felt like let's keep this first one as simple as we can. So I cut that top flap off and just glued my smaller half round circle onto my larger one. The smaller one is a dark gray, and then that larger one is the same matte silver cardstock. I'm using my scrap to cut out a hole, just a regular old hole punch hole to cover up the center of that crank. You could put a brad in there and it actually would spin. Next time, that's what I'm doing. There are 2 dies in here that you can use for things to fill your gumball machine. I'm just using the circle die, and I've cut a rainbow of colors, but there's also a heart. You could do heart-shaped gumballs here. I'm arranging them in my machine, starting from the middle. I like the idea of that purple one being lowest, where it looks like that's definitely the next one that's going to come out. The orange one is a little higher than that, and then this green one's going to be like somewhere in between. So they're in a row, but they're not just all evenly lined up. That felt a little unnatural when I was kind of laying things out to begin with. I also wanted to let you know that this is a card I made for the Colorful Options Monthly Challenge. I'm on their design team, and I just love that challenge. It's a really great beginner challenge every month. They give you a single color to focus on. This month, the color is blue, all shades of blue. But if you aren't keen on the color of the month, you can always create a project in a rainbow. And so I did blue and a rainbow. I'll link the challenge below because I really, really love it. It was one of the first places I started when I was entering card challenges for the first time. Next, we're going to assemble our box card. So I'm taking the other piece, and this is the top of the die, right? So the edges are sort of beveled down towards my cutting mat, and I'm adding glue just along one flap. And I will use my grid mat to kind of line this up. I want to make sure I'm putting everything together straight. And I will overlap this with one flap from my gumball machine. It does not matter which flap, okay? And so I am lining that up the best I can, and then I will pick it up and I'm just gently squeezing those together to make sure I haven't overextended and accidentally covered up one of those score lines with one of the flaps. Then I will turn this over. I'm folding that flap in and adding glue to the flap. Inside my gumball machine, I am going to fold at the score line that is just inside of the hole we cut out of it. Okay, so it's that score line, and I will lay it flat until that flap overlaps the glue. I'm going to press firmly. I want to glue this closed while the whole thing is pressed flat so that I know it will fit in my envelope. It is tempting to put it together in box form, but if you do that, you run the risk of the glue drying in a way that's going to buckle the cardstock when you try to get it into the envelope. For my sentiment, I cut out this purple piece using the label from the snow globe. And I'm using an older stamp set called It's Party Time from Spellbinders. And I love this one that says, let's have a blowout for your birthday. It seemed to go really, really well with bubblegum. I'm using some gray ink. It doesn't matter. I'm stamping it just so I kind of know like how big it is, so I can line up my stamp on my little sentiment circle a little more easily. I took the negative that I cut that out of and I'm taping it into my MISTI, and then I will lay that little label right inside of it. And now I know that my sentiment is going to be centered perfectly on that little die cut piece. I'm stamping it in white pigment ink because I'm going to heat emboss this. That ink takes a little while to dry, but I'm stamping it like 4 or 5 times. I have 3 white ink pads. One is a hot mess, and that was an accident, but now I use it for things that might accidentally ruin my ink pad. One is super juicy, and this one is really dry. I like this one when I'm stamping sentiments to make sure that the ink isn't going to ooze out the sides of my letters and distort them and make them bigger or messier than I want them to be. I'm adding some fine detail white embossing powder, but regular white embossing powder would work really well here too. These letters are a little bit thicker, and then I will set that with my heat tool and melt all of that powder. There are some little holes that get cut out of the sides of this label, and so I've added just a little bit of glue on either side, and I'll add some tiny silver pearls to cover those up and really finish it off. We're going to pop this up. So I have a strip that is 1 by 3.5 inches, and then I'm going to score it at 3/4 of an inch, 1 1/8 of an inch, 1.5 inches, 2 1/4 inches, 2 5/8 of an inch, and 3 inches. I will put those measurements in the description box below, but really this is about teaching you a method. Okay, we are going to make an hourglass pop-up. So I am accordion folding the first 3 score lines. All right, on the bottom, that piece is 3/4 of an inch. To create an hourglass, the other 2 score lines need to be at half of 3/4, which is 3/8. All right. So then at the top, I have another piece that is 3/4 of an inch, right? That's the top and the bottom of my hourglass. And then I have 2 more score lines at 3/8 of an inch. That bottom flap isn't a full 3/4, mostly to make sure everything fits together well. I will add glue to that, and then I will press this flat while I'm gluing it. I am not going to burnish those score lines. I want this to pop up. Okay, so they're finger pressed, but I did not burnish it with my bone folder. I've added a little bit of glue, and I will place this right behind my label, and it hides just perfectly. Right? I have written down these measurements because I know I'm going to use this die set and that label again, and this works perfectly. But really, that's a method. You can create that hourglass pop-up the same way so that the second and third score lines are going to be half of that first measurement. I used my wet glue to wiggle and make sure that that is ending up right in the middle. And this all folds flat now. I can tuck that right underneath my label if I want. And I probably will because I have that little bobble on there, but it also tucks underneath it. You can go either way. It fits beautifully in an A2 envelope, and the whole thing comes together super quickly. I hope you've enjoyed this. I have another card video using this die set, but creating something totally different. So please keep your eyes out for that. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and I will see you next time.